The nominations have been announced, and the great yearly rock and roll tradition has begun. Voting? Well, yeah, but what I'm talking about is the annual debate. It's Rock and Roll Hall of Fame time. Nominees, snubs, predictions. That's all coming up next on Track by Track. Hey everybody, my name's Kyle, and this is Track by Track, music reviews, news, and commentary. Thanks for tuning in today. And if this is your first time here, please take a second to click subscribe so you won't miss future reviews and more. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame has announced the nominees for the class of 2025. And as you might expect, it's yet another crazy mix of generation and genre-spanning selections. We've got various flavors of rock and roll, from classic to new wave to grunge. We've got pop, new and old, as well as rap and international acts that are guaranteed to generate polarizing opinions. As for me, I'll say there's acts here that I'm thrilled to see getting recognized, one or two very surprising selections, as well as several names I fully expected to see on this year's ballot. So let's get into it. Here are the nominees for the Rock Hall class of 2025. Bad Company, The Black Crowes, Mariah Carey, Chubby Checker, Joe Cocker, Billy Idol, Joy Division and New Order, Cyndi Lauper, Maná, Oasis, Outkast, Fish, Soundgarden, and The White Stripes. All right, so there's a lot to break down here. As always, we've got a mix of first-time nominees, along with acts whose names we've seen on the list multiple times in the past. Out of the 14 names on the ballot in 2025, over half of them are first-time nominees. Surprisingly, though, none of them are being nominated in their first year of eligibility, which means no so-called walk-ins will happen in 2025. I'm also surprised to see there's no metal acts and no country acts on this year's ballot, which is news that will likely disappoint and satisfy many of this channel's viewers. And I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole of acts that got snubbed this year, but I do want to mention the absence of New York Dolls. They've been nominated 3 times in the past, most recently in 2022. Considering singer David Johansen's recent cancer diagnosis, it would have been nice to see his band on the ballot again. Still, they could end up being inducted under a catch-all category like musical excellence. All right, I'll talk more about the first-time nominees in a few minutes, but before we do, I want to dig into the repeat offenders. The most nominated act on this year's ballot is Soundgarden. They received their 3rd nomination this year, following prior noms in 2020 and 2023. Speaking of 2023, this year's list has me feeling a bit of deja vu for 2 years ago, because 4 of the returning acts were last nominated then. In addition to Soundgarden, The White Stripes, Cyndi Lauper, and the combo of Joy Division and New Order all previously shared the ballot in 2023. This year, The White Stripes hold the distinction of being the youngest act on the list. They've been eligible since that 2023 nomination, so this second shot comes in just their 3rd year of qualifying. When it comes to The White Stripes, though, I have to say I'm not sure I would nominate them at all, let alone induct them. I'm just not convinced that band has earned it. On the other hand, I do think that Jack White has been building a highly impactful career that at some point deserves recognition, perhaps in one of the categories like musical excellence. But in the performers category with The White Stripes, that's not working for me. As for Soundgarden, I have a feeling this will finally be their year. I even predicted this when they were last nominated, that they would not make the cut in 2023, but the 3rd time would be a charm. Now in 2025, things are looking much better for Soundgarden, and their messy legal squabbles of the past have mostly been settled. This will be their year. I have the same feeling about Oasis. When they were first nominated 2 years ago, there was no they. The idea of the Gallagher brothers ever reforming seemed like a hell freezing over sort of scenario. But here we are in 2025, with Oasis about to embark on a massive stadium tour. There's so much buzz around that reunion that I find it hard to believe the Rock Hall voters won't buy in as well. That doesn't mean the boys will show up if they are inducted, but the odds of that happening are certainly better than they were when they were first nominated. Unpopular opinion time. Mariah Carey deserves to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Carrie has one of the most iconic and legendary voices in the history of music. Rock and roll purists will dismiss her based on genre, but that's not an argument I accept. The Rock Hall has been inducting R&B singers since the very beginning, including the first woman inducted, Aretha Franklin. This marks the second nomination for Carrie, who has been eligible since 2016. I was honestly surprised she didn't get inducted on her first nomination, and I fully expect she'll make the list of inductees when they're announced later this spring. That induction will likely come at a cost for another second-time nominee, though, and that's Cyndi Lauper. Mariah and Cyndi are the only two solo female acts on the ballot this year, and they both fall into more of the pop side of the rock spectrum. I don't see them both getting in on the same year. And is it possible that a diversity-influenced vote may favor Mariah? Of course. But even setting diversity aside, I'd still pick Mariah over Cyndi in terms of overall impact on popular music and culture. But following that diversity thread a little further, I'll say there's a chance they both get in just to have better female representation in the class of 2025. But if only one gets in, it's Mariah. The final repeat nomination is the one I'm most excited for, though, and that's Joy Division and New Order. I think most fans hoped, if not expected, that if they were ever to get the Rock Hall's attention, it would be paired together this way. I agree, and it is entirely appropriate. The Rock Hall made the right call when they nominated them together in 2023 and again this year. I'm certainly a Joy Division fan, and for me, their evolution into New Order following the death of Ian Curtis was one of rock's greatest transformations. Still, as much as I'd love to see them inducted, and as a fan, they're easily my personal favorite on this year's list, I truly don't think they'll get the win. I think they're perhaps a little too fringe for most US music fans and maybe more impactful in the UK. All right, let's circle back to the first-time nominees. It's a group that inevitably includes names that make you scratch your head and say, wait a minute, how are they not already in the Rock Hall? The biggest example of that has to be Chubby Checker. He's been eligible for induction since the very first year of the Rock Hall, yet 2025 is somehow his very first nomination. To be fair, his iconic song, The Twist, has already been inducted into the Rock Hall in their occasionally used singles category. So to that end, Checker is already in the Rock Hall. Of course, it was the same case for Link Wray, whose song Rumble was inducted as a single, yet he still ended up being inducted as an artist in 2023 under the category of musical influence. I actually think that's the most appropriate thing for Chubby Checker as well. I don't think he'll get in the performer category, but I do think he's more than deserving as a musical influence. Then there's Joe Cocker, an artist that's been eligible for induction for 30 years already, yet is shockingly receiving his first nomination this year. He's a classic, no doubt, and I'm happy to see him on the ballot. That being said, I don't expect he'll make the cut this time. Not that he hasn't earned it, it's just that when I look at the competition and consider the expectation that the Rock Hall will want a variety of styles in the class of 2025, I think he's going to take a back seat to another act, and that act is Bad Company. Here's a band that's seen a lot of love from the Track by Track audience in the past. You all ranked them number 6 on our top 10 Rock Hall SNUBS countdown. I fully expect Bad Company to essentially grab the foreigner slot for 70s rock when the Rock Hall casts their votes. But if I'm being honest, I'd actually rather see frontman Paul Rodgers inducted on his own, perhaps in the musical excellence category. In addition to Badco, he's done great work with Free, Queen, and as a solo artist. Still, I predict he'll end up getting in with Bad Company when this year's winners are announced. I also expect we'll see Phish as part of the class of 2025. Dave Matthews Band obviously kicked down the doors of the Rock Hall for modern jam bands, and I think Phish will follow along on their coattails. Not that Phish hasn't earned it. Their wildly successful and, if not unexpected, residency at the Las Vegas Sphere certainly shows there's a massive amount of fan support for them. To that end, I expect they'll also see a strong showing in the official fan vote as well. Also receiving their first nomination this year is the Black Crowes. Like a few others I've mentioned, the Crowes have had a bit of a resurgence in the past year and dropped a solid new album in 2024. Still, I'm not convinced that the band has earned a place in the Rock Hall. Don't get me wrong, I love these guys and their throwback style of rock and roll. True rock and roll at that. But they just don't move all the needles for me, particularly in terms of influence. Then there's Maná, the one act on this year's list that I'm certain the vast majority of people heard and said, who? These Spanish rockers are actually really good. I mean, you'd hope so with a Rock Hall nomination, right? I discovered them back in the mid-90s and thought they had a little bit of an old-school Police vibe to their music. I only have one of their albums, though, and haven't followed them closely in a long time. And while it's nice to see the Rock Hall acknowledging non-English language acts that have had more global influence than American mainstream, that's also why I don't expect they'll make the cut. As has been said many times before, it's an honor just to be nominated. I'd also repeat that same mantra to Billy Idol. I've expected we'd see him get a nomination for a long time now, but I also expected that would be the limit of his recognition. I don't think his musical career ever quite elevated to induction level, even considering Generation X. I will say, though, that I had hoped when he was nominated, it would be with Steve Stevens. Similar to Pat Benatar and Neil Giraldo's nomination and induction a few years ago, I think Idol owes an enormous debt to Steve Stevens in terms of galvanizing his sound. It's a shame not to see Stevens recognized here. All right, the last act we need to talk about is likely to be the most contentious nomination as far as this channel's audience is concerned, and that's Outkast. I've addressed the age-old debate about whether or not rap acts should be in the Rock Hall too many times already, so I won't rehash it again here. It's status quo at this point. Rap is in the Rock Hall. And Outkast has certainly been on most people's R&B shortlists for nomination for several years. They've been eligible since 2019, and truth be told, I'm okay with them having to wait for 6 years. I think the hip-hop acts we've seen inducted in recent years deserved their earlier slots in the line. And with that in mind, I think Outkast's time has come. Sorry, haters. All right, now it's time to make some predictions. Who do I think will be inducted into the Rock Hall in 2025? Remember, these aren't me picking my personal favorites. That would be a very different list. These are the acts I think the voting members of the Rock Hall are going to pick, starting with Bad Company, Mariah Carey, Oasis, Outkast, Fish, and Soundgarden. I'll predict we'll see Chubby Checker inducted in a non-performer category, and my wild card pick for induction would be Cyndi Lauper. As for the fan vote, I think we can expect a strong showing for Fish, as well as Bad Company, Soundgarden, and Cyndi Lauper. Unless they can mobilize the Latino vote in a big way, I think we'll see Maná anchoring the bottom end of the list throughout most of the vote. Speaking of the fan vote, if you want to make your voice heard, be sure to participate by visiting vote.rockhall.com. The fan vote is open through April 21st, with the top 5 vote earners earning slots on the official fan ballot to be tallied with the member vote. The final list of the 2025 Rock Hall inductees will be announced in late April, with the induction ceremony expected to take place in Los Angeles later this fall. Meanwhile, what are your thoughts on this year's list of nominees? Is there anyone you think has a lock on being inducted? Or are there acts you think don't quite deserve the honor? Who is an act that got snubbed this year that you think should be on the ballot? How do you feel about rap and hip-hop going into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? And are you one of those who thinks the whole thing is just a sham anyway? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments below. Once again, my name is Kyle, and this has been Track by Track. If you like this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. Plus, be sure to check out some of these other videos below that I think you might also enjoy. And of course, be sure to click subscribe, because true music fans always want new releases the day they come out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.